fix your potholes or lose out on the cash to do it. That's the government's warning to local councils as they prepare to hand out £1.6 billion that's been earmarked for road repairs.
But critics, such as the actor Nigel Havers, are worried that's not enough. Here's what he wanted to say to the Transport Secretary when we spoke to him last week.
Government constantly wastes money. It's time they stopped doing that and actually worked out how to deal with a whole range of issues which are really important. And you can't say potholes are not, because of course they are. They're really vital. People get killed because of it. People get injured because of it. That only makes more for the national health. I could go on, but I mean, come on, get a grip. Heidi Alexander, I hope you're listening to this. She's the Secretary of State for Transport. What is she doing about it?
Well, serendipity, because here, able, we hope, to answer Nigel's question is the Transport Secretary, Heidi Alexander. Good morning, Ms Alexander. It's a tricky one for you, this, because the asphalt industry itself has been saying for the last couple of weeks that this £1.6 billion that you've allocated to filling in potholes around the country won't, to use a phrase, touch the sides. You need to spend at least £17 billion, many, many times more. You're not going to come up with that kind of money, are you?
So I'm not pretending that the money that we announced just before Christmas is going to be able to fix every pothole on every road in every county of the country. But what we are doing is making a record amount of investment. That £1.6 billion is £500 million more than local councils got from central government last year. That's roughly a 40% increase. And if it was all used on fixing potholes, that would equate to 7 million more potholes being filled next year. But listening to what Nigel Havers was saying, he is right to say that we need to get value for money in the way that we spend this money. And that is precisely why the Prime Minister and I are today announcing new measures to tackle the potholes that have, let's be honest, plagued Britain's road users for far too long. We will require councils to set out how they are using the money. It may be that proactive road resurfacing is the right thing to do in particular locations. That might represent the best value for money. We also know that it can be really frustrating for people to see road contractors come out, do a bodge job on a pothole, then have to come back 2 months later to do exactly the same piece of work because the contract hasn't been managed properly. That's why we need to know from local authorities how they are spending their money. If they get that report up in the summer on their website so that public can see how the money is being spent, and if they provide a little bit more technical information to us in the autumn, that will then unlock the final quarterly payment of the money that they have been allocated. And I think it's reasonable for government, when we're making a record level of investment like this, to ask councils to demonstrate to us that they're spending that money really wisely.
It's certainly true to say that the temporary repairs that you refer to there are undoubtedly a false economy, because they just have to come back a few weeks or months later and do the same job again. A lot of our viewers want to know the answer to this question. Why doesn't the road tax, which we all have to pay if we drive a car, why doesn't that go towards filling in these potholes?
So in terms of road tax and the accounts that goes into in government, it's the really critical thing is that the allocations that we are making are commensurate to the size of the challenge. And over the last decade of the Conservative government, who didn't prioritise this, we had the nation's roads in a real state. They became a bit of a symbol of decline. That's why within 6 or 7 months of us taking office, we made this issue a priority.
Sorry, I don't think that's the answer to Richard's question.
Councils are getting by 500 million.
Yeah, but why doesn't road tax get ring-fenced and put directly into our roads?
So generally, as a government, we don't hypothecate taxation. There are a whole set of different issues, public services that need to be provided, and we collect taxes, we raise money, and then we work out, the Chancellor works out in the budget and through a spending review how to allocate those resources. Okay. The point that I am making is that this is very much significantly more than the last Conservative government were spending on road repairs. And the reason we're doing that is because at the last general election, we promised change. We've got a plan for change here, and we know that having roads which can operate reliably, smoothly, safely is really, really important to the public, and that's why we are prioritising it.
As it is important that Heathrow Airport operates smoothly and reliably. Now, what are the answers that you, as the Transport Secretary, have got on why one substation fire closed down Europe's busiest airport? And whose side are you on in the blame game that's going on? Because the National Grid says there was more than enough power to keep the airport open.
So what happened on Thursday night, the early hours of Friday morning last week, was really unprecedented, and it was a very significant incident. And I would just like to say thank you to the 70 firefighters who put out that blaze, and also the staff at National Grid and Heathrow who worked quickly to get flights landing again at Heathrow within about 18 hours of the flights starting. Now, I spoke to the Chief Executive of Heathrow on Friday morning. He told me that whilst the airport has multiple power supplies, the extent of the disruption caused by the fire at the substation was such that they had to reconfigure the power supplies in the airport. There were particular problems, I was told, at Terminals 2 and 4. They do have backup energy systems. Those systems are designed to protect the critical key bits of systems within the airport, not to power the entire airport. When I spoke to the Chief Executive on Friday morning, he told me that that type of backup arrangement was typical for airports of that size.
OK, but
now,
hang
the
on a
airport
moment.
itself
Sorry.
is commissioning a review. And so what they had to do was turn all the systems off, Susanna. Let me make this point, because I think it's an important one. They had to turn all the systems off. They then had to restart them, reboot them, and ensure that they were operating safely. They were able to get some flights landing from about 4 o'clock. And obviously, I'm pleased that the airport was running on Saturday and Sunday as normal. I do recognise that there will be thousands of people who had to put their travel plans on hold and who have experienced, significant disruption and distress. But so, I will be looking also very carefully at the report that Heathrow have commissioned themselves.
Yeah, so apparently there were two
there's a slight delay on the line.
There were two substations available. So is the issue no longer that there wasn't power? The issue is that Heathrow didn't have the ability to switch to those other substations?
So the power had to be reconfigured, is what I understand, and that they then had to shut down all of their systems and safely restart. And, I would just say that when you're running a big piece of transport infrastructure, safely restarting systems and doing all that testing does take some time.
But do you think that they panicked?
To close the airport,
the decision it was a panicked decision? Because let's face it, the boss of Heathrow went to bed just after midnight as the fire was taking hold, and deputised the decision as to whether or not to close the airport to his deputy. And it was the deputy who made the decision. And the question that we're really asking now is, was that a bad decision? For all you may have been told about the difficulties of rebooting and all the rest of it, would it not have been possible much, much more quickly to switch across to one of the other two substations, which the National Grid implies it would have been a relatively simple operation, and got Heathrow up and running again by breakfast time?
I'm not privy to all the information that the senior leadership team at Heathrow Airport had available to them at midnight on Thursday night going into Friday morning. I'm not going to second-guess, as the Transport Secretary, the judgments that a private company, a transport operator, has taken. I am, though, very interested in the review that the Heathrow board have commissioned into their response and their resilience plans and the recovery from this incident.
Were you surprised that the boss went to bed?
The government has instructed...
Were you surprised that the boss went to bed? Were you surprised?
I don't know what led to that. I don't know what led to that decision. I was told that the chief operating officer.
But Heidi Alexander, you may have not known what led to him going to bed and putting the light out, but were you surprised when you learned that he'd gone to bed?
So I've had experience of running transport infrastructure in the past, and one of the most important things you can have in a moment of crisis is a really important team. And if he had trust in the chief operating officer to take that decision, and if his judgment was that he was going to have a whole number of critical decisions to be take in the following 24 hours, then, you know, I'm not going to second guess why he came to the conclusion that that was the right thing for him to do. What I'm interested in doing now, though, Richard, is making sure that we learn the lessons, that we've got energy resilience in place when it comes to our critical national infrastructure. I've asked to see the output from the Heathrow internal review, and the Energy Secretary, Ed Miliband, and I will be looking very carefully at the report that we have commissioned from an organisation called NESO, which is the National Energy Systems Operator.
Thank you.
And they are due to be reporting back to us in early May.
Heidi Alexander, thank you.